Hey guys, welcome back to We're Not the Same. I'm Brian here with my beautiful wife, Katie.
And today we're going to be talking about all the things that we would do differently during pregnancy and childbirth if we ever did it again or could go back in time. So let's dive in. So this week is our little one, Georgia. It's her 3rd birthday. And so in honor of that, we decided to finally do this episode, which I've had on our list of episode ideas for a while. And that is going to be talking about what I would do differently for pregnancy and birth, basically. Because as with everything we talk on this podcast, we didn't really know what we know now back in the days of pregnancies and births. We knew a little.
It is interesting. Yeah. I feel like we were on the precipice of not knowing everything that we know now, but on the precipice of like knowing some things that we shouldn't do.
We were in the realm.
We were in the realm, yes.
But we just...
like the gray space.
Yeah. Like we were on the right path, but we didn't have all the way in. The mindset. Like we were talking today about the importance of mindset. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't have the different mindset, the more holistic mindset. We had the traditional Western mindset of, you go to an OB and, you do whatever they say is best and have your baby in a hospital and do all of that. So I think now we have the knowledge and the mindset. And so we would do things differently. So obviously there's no going back. But for those of you who are still in that time of life where you're expecting or plan to be expecting in the future, hopefully this can provide some helpful information. So I don't think we really understood in the past, which it seems so obvious, but we weren't really in tune with the fact that you're setting your child up for life with nutrition, and really even with girls, your grandchildren too. It's generational because girls get their eggs when they're still in utero. So when you carry a daughter, you're carrying part of your future grandchildren too. So it's just crazy the impacts that, your choices have when you're pregnant, and it may not be revealed for literally generations.
Yeah, your placenta does such a good job at like filtering stuff out, but it also is providing all the nutrients to the baby and all that, and that's a lot dependent on your health and what it's as I understand it. Like basically, the baby's going to take the nutrients and stuff that it needs for the most part, which means it's going to be draining you, and so that means you have to get all of your nutrition in place and in order before. Ultimately before conceiving is probably the best, so that you're nutrient rich for that for the baby to start growing.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just start at the very beginning. So you decide that you want to have a baby. So before you get to that part, the very first thing I ever did in our trying to conceive journey was to get off the birth control pill.
Oh man.
So I was on the birth control pill for a couple years and totally do not recommend. I think everybody who has been on the pill and gotten off of it, I can have a story to tell you about it, a horror story. Because when I was on the pill, I didn't have any issues. It was once I tried to get off of it that all the issues came to the surface. So that actually really depletes your body of nutrients. And obviously, if you're trying to conceive a child, you need to have a lot of nutrients. So luckily, though, I was off the pill for probably about 6+ months before we started. Well, with Avery, we got pregnant on the first try. So we didn't really have a trying to conceive. We tried one time.
Was it only 6 months? It felt like you were off of it for quite a while.
Maybe it was like 8 months. I mean, it wasn't a full year.
But that was really good intuition. Again, something that you had ultimately to get off of it. I mean, some people get off of it and then start trying right away. It was good that you recognized that to start getting off of that to prepare. And you started taking prenatals like almost right away too, or as you were in process.
That was the other thing I was going to say. I did start taking prenatal vitamins, but that's the first major change that I would do is the prenatal vitamins. So I looked up the other day the prenatal vitamins that I took with both pregnancies actually. And, they have the food dyes in them, all the additives. They have, it's all synthetic forms of all the vitamins and minerals that were in them. So, it's just...
In case you didn't know, multivitamins are like a total scam. Like the mix of all the different vitamins all together, it's some counteract each other. A lot don't get absorbed. They're not in their most absorbable form. Like it's all a sham. Like they can sell large quantities of these, and I think it makes everybody feel good. Like, oh, I'm taking my multivitamin, so I don't need to worry about anything else.
And that's like in pregnancy, especially the danger of them is that, and I'm not advising to just not take prenatal and not do anything else. I'll get to that in a second. But they gave me a false sense of, oh, well, I can just, I didn't consciously think this, but subconsciously you're like, oh, I can eat whatever I need because I'm taking a prenatal. So the baby's going to be good. Like I'm taking the prenatal for the baby. And then, I can eat whatever my pregnancy cravings tell me to eat, which was a lot of McDonald's and Chick-fil-A.
Avery was our Chick-fil-A baby and Georgia was our McDonald's baby.
Yep. I literally got Chick-fil-A nuggets on the way to the hospital with Avery because I was like...
Well, thank goodness we did because that was...
Yeah, then I didn't eat for like 50 hours after that.
Yeah, we were awake for 51 hours for that pregnancy, or delivery.
Well, this is not a birth story video. If you want to hear both of the birth stories on my YouTube channel, I have shared a lot about both pregnancies and births, so you can go check that out. But yes, so for prenatal vitamins, now I would take probably a lot of different things, from beef organs to more just whole food sources of vitamins. I just saw a post where someone was actually happened to be talking about prenatals, and they talked about desiccated oysters, which I know oysters are like a nutrient dense food. I've never had an oyster, and I don't know that I ever will, but I would do it in pill form probably.
Probably, yeah. And I don't know, I forgot what all the like risks things that people say about oysters with like, I don't
probably
know if it's
the heavy metals or
and
something.
heavy metals and stuff, anything in like the sea.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting with like the microplastics and stuff too, in the sea. But
I'm sure there's somebody that does like third-party testing on the supplements or something.
Yes.
But yeah, there's just a lot out there. So I think in general, though, for both of us, because obviously the man's health is important too, I would just have wished that we would have been more aware of nutrition, obviously for so many reasons, but especially for trying to conceive, that if we had just been more aware of, taking care of ourselves better and not eating out as much, even if we wouldn't have known like everything we now know, just cook more meals at home,
Well, that's something too that we've talked about. Like, I mean, we're thankful that we conceived pretty quickly, but we could have done better on the nutrition side. But I think a lot of people do struggle with fertility. And there's been examples of folks. I remember I think it was like CM Coving or whoever, who's a big influencer or whatever.
She's like an OG fashion blogger.
Yeah, but they were having infertility issues, I believe, and she like cleaned up her diet and then they were able to get pregnant. I think a lot of people skip over the clear thing that's in front of them that's just hard to do and maybe not thought about.
I don't think it's clear in front of them is the thing. I don't think people realize. We obviously didn't realize that, like you never thought Chick-fil-A was health food, but you didn't think it was actually killing you. Yeah. So I still eat Chick-fil-A just for any of the haters out there, but I'm not shaming anyone. The fact of the matter is it's not good for you.
So you mentioned beef organs. Like, what's that all about?
So I should put a link to, there's a couple good podcasts out there from Weston A. Price, the Weston A. Price Foundation, which is like a really, they're really knowledgeable about health and nutrition and kind of the ancient traditions
they've like traveled the world.
Like, so Weston Price was actually a dentist.
Oh, nice.
And so he traveled to a lot of tribal communities around the world and saw that they actually had like pretty good dental health. And so he dug into why that was, and they obviously had a lot of more animal-based diets and all those things. So you can look into the history of that. But they have a lot of information out there. I remember hearing from them when there was the baby formula shortage during kind of the pandemic, and they had a recipe for homemade baby formula. And so they just have lots of knowledge. Their podcast is Wise Traditions, if you want to look that up. But what I was going to say is that in one of their podcasts, they talked about how vitamin A, which I remember when I was pregnant, being concerned about how much vitamin A I was getting, because you're told that you shouldn't have too much vitamin A when you're pregnant. But if you actually dig deep into the study, the one and only study that is based on, from 60 years ago, and it was a study based on synthetic forms of vitamin A causing birth defects, and actually moms who had higher levels of vitamin A actually had a lower instance of birth defects. And so once again, there have been studies about lavender causing prepubescent boys to develop breasts, but it's synthetic lavender, synthetic fragrance of lavender, not true lavender oil. So you got to really dig deep into, what study is being used to guide all of these recommendations of sorts. But anyway, so naturally occurring vitamin A found in foods such as beef liver and other beef organs are very high in vitamin A. It's actually really important for both mom and dad to have high levels of vitamin A when you're trying to conceive. So that is the main. Beef livers and beef organs in general are super nutrient dense,
and the most absorbable nutrient food. So like when you think about, vitamins, I would say is probably the least, like synthetic vitamins is the least absorbed, quantities of nutrients. And then you've got, vegetables and things like that. They have vitamins and nutrients in them, but they're not as bioavailable. So your body has a tougher time absorbing those nutrients. And then we know, like when you cook vegetables and things, the amount of vitamins and minerals go down, and most of us eat cooked vegetables. So then above vegetables is your meats and organs and all of that. That has the highest absorbable nutritional content when it comes to vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting how most people think that because of what we're told, that meat is really hard for the body to digest and things, but actually raw vegetables are harder for the body to digest than meat. And the reason beef specifically and meat that comes from ruminant animals, which are animals that have more than one stomach, is because they eat the grass, they eat the leafy greens and those vegetables, and their bodies are designed to digest those things and to absorb the nutrients from those things. And then we eat the meat, and that's what our body can handle digesting. And we're able to get the nutrients in a bioavailable form from eating meat.
And it's so true. I mean, we eat in pill form, like desiccated organs. So it's basically freeze-dried organs. They cut up the organ, freeze-dry it, and put it in a pill form, which is a great way to do it if you can't stand the taste or texture of different meat organs.
Or you just don't have access to like grass-fed organs. Some Whole Foods apparently sell grass-fed organs. Ours doesn't. So I don't even know, other than like the farmer's market, where we could really get grass-fed organ meat.
That's true. But it really does work. I mean, like one of the easiest examples for me is liver is really high in B vitamins too, like B12, which if you know anything about, trying to get yourself caffeinated or whatever, like B12 is kind of the natural form of like a pick-me-up. It gives you energy. So I literally, I'll get that 2:00 slump that we all get. And I've been trying, instead of coffee, take my 5 or 6 beef liver pills. And I swear within 30 minutes, I'm like a whole new person. So it really does, like you can tell, like it's readily absorbed. And sure enough, it's got the high B vitamins, the A, copper, and a bunch of other minerals. If
selenium, chromium, stuff you probably never heard of unless you're into nutrition.
Everybody says like when you start getting into organs, like start with the liver, because it's one of the most highly nutrient organs that's available.
And in America, probably like everyone has fatty liver. Maybe not fatty liver disease, but we're all headed that way if you're on a standard American diet. So taking care of your liver like supports like. So if you're taking liver pills, that's going to help out your liver. If you're taking brain pills, that's going to help support your brain. So if you're taking the liver pills, then that's going to help your liver to detoxify and strengthen and all of that. So one of the things we actually learned during COVID, we got into taking a lot of different supplements, and we learned more about finding the whole food sources of supplements and water soluble versus fat soluble and the interaction between different vitamins. And so we literally had a schedule each day of the different supplements that we would take in order to, help protect ourselves from not just COVID, but all illnesses, boost our immune system, which, it's hard to believe that was a taboo word just like 1.5 to 2 years ago. Literally on Instagram, they banned the hashtag immune system or something like that. Like
My
just
goodness.
Insanity. But that comes into play with prenatal vitamins. If you're just taking one prenatal pill, you really don't know what your body is getting. Hopefully your body, takes what it needs most, I guess, but I don't know that it does for sure. But you shouldn't take water soluble and fat soluble vitamins at the same time. So whenever you schedule out, and there's resources on Instagram, a lot of the holistic people that, are popular, they have posts on all this and there's different schools of thought. People do different things. So you obviously would hopefully be able to find a practitioner that you could work with, that you would trust, who would get to know you and your specific needs, maybe even run some labs to understand, where you're most efficient and try to support most in those areas. So I think there's a lot that people can do, especially when it comes to fertility. So if you do struggle with fertility, just start looking into it. And I know it's expensive and I know it's a pain and I know it feels like it takes forever, but what's the alternative? The alternative is other expensive options that probably harm your health. Maybe you still get a baby in the end, but I'm not sure, fertility treatments are really great for the health of mothers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think people are starting to become more aware of this. And so hopefully we'll see a shift in care of moms, because I feel like there's a lot of care around babies and baby health, but even less so of moms. Nobody's really worrying about the health of the mom throughout the pregnancy, except for in terms of the baby.
Yeah. So what's the big takeaway? So if you're starting to think about having babies or pregnant already, like, do we ditch the prenatals and go with just organs, or what's your final verdict?
I don't want to say like what somebody should do, because that's going to be up to each individual, but I would look into beef organs. I would look into make sure you're at least getting your nutrients from like a whole food vitamin source. Like you can literally just Google whole food prenatal, and then you'll see like there are pills where it's not coming from a synthetic vitamin, it's coming from a food source for each of the minerals or whatever.
And there's a couple different beef organ brands out there. One of the ones that we use is Heart and Soil. Is a good brand. There's a couple other ones too that are out there.
Yeah, more and more, lot growing, but that's the one that we have tried and true.
Yep. Comes in glass bottles, and they just seem to be a focus on overall quality.
Yeah. Okay, so enough about prenatal. So the next thing, this is actually something I feel that we did right during when I was pregnant with Avery.
Yep.
Was birth classes. And we found, I don't even know how on earth I got into this realm, but we ended up doing the Bradley method, which we'll explain in a minute, but it actually was 12 weeks of classes once a week. So we had 12 classes, not just, a lot of people go for 1 hour at the hospital and they teach you how to change a diaper or whatever.
Yeah.
So this was very in-depth. We had a workbook. There's a book called The Bradley Method, which you read together. And we were in a class with a couple other couples and
facilitator.
With a facilitator, obviously. And I was at a birth center where we, it was great. We loved it so much.
Yeah, I gotta go on my soapbox here for this one. So it was an incredible experience. Like, I'm so glad. Like, I was hesitant about a 12-week thing. Like, that is a huge commitment, and like it was not close by. It was probably a 40-minute drive, 35.
And I will say this was with our first child, so it was a little easier
Yes.
Everybody in the class was on their first child at that point. I feel like that's the main time that you have a chance to go and do a commitment like that.
And we'll talk a lot more about the actual Bradley method in a minute, but part of it is...
Well, what is it called? What's the subtitle?
Yeah, it's the husband-led childbirth.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I loved it, is like, men, you have to step it up. You're part of this too, and your wife going through pregnancy, especially delivery, which is what the Bradley method is all about.
Well, there were some things about pregnancy too.
That's true. They talked about food and nutrition and a bit about that. But I think most importantly is as you get into the situation where you are solely focused on getting that baby out and going through all the different stages that are involved with pregnancy, to be a man, like, you need to be involved in that, and you have certain tasks that you need to take care of and be aware of what those are. You need to be able to...
Not sleeping on the couch in the delivery room.
Yeah, that gets me super angry.
I always see pictures like that, and it's like, what are you doing?
This is your wife and your kid, and like, it's time to step up and be there and be part of this. And so a lot of the Bradley method is learning like different techniques and learning the different phases of birth and what you're going through mentally and physically, and different techniques for, different pressure points, and also communication. Like, we talk, it's kind of almost like therapy. Like, you talk about like, hey, what things would you like or wouldn't you like?
Yeah.
Couples therapy. Like, Katie's not a big one of, it's going to be okay, babe. You got this. Like, yeah. Katie's more of the tough love kind of deal. And if you don't know that, or, if it's different in a pregnancy situation, like, you should be having those conversations.
Yeah.
But also it's so critically important that you are the one that's going to be interfacing as the husband with the medical staff and things. You need
in
to
a
push
hospital.
back.
Well, really in any setting where you're, dealing with whether it's a midwife or a hospital staff, they're going to do what they have to do in an emergency, So if they're stopping to ask a preference or allow you to ask questions, then, even in an emergency, like, you should ask questions if you have them. Not saying that by any means, but that was one of the points our instructor made of like, you should be advocating for your spouse and your child.
Yes, because you don't know what mental state and stage that you're going to be going through when you're in the pregnancy, and sometimes you're not able to talk as you're going through contractions and all those different things. Yeah. But I think the other thing that's so critically important and made a huge difference was it was one of the best experiences of our lives, as hard as it was and all the different things that are involved with, getting a baby out, the bond that you have, a husband and wife, to get through that together. And I felt so much more prepared going through something like this, going through the Bradley method, that you just feel so much stronger as a couple when you go through something like that. And then the ultimate reward of a amazing little baby. Yeah.
Well, I feel like that if we hadn't have done that, what time would you have really spent looking into pregnancy and birth, and that not as a negative thing. That's just the way it is. The woman becomes a mom the day, you see 2 lines on the pregnancy test. I feel like the dad can happen at different stages a little later, because obviously you don't have the hormone shifts. You don't have the kicks in your belly. You don't feel all the things. So it typically is the woman who's pregnant, who's looking into things and researching and learning about pregnancy, learning about birth, learning about what's going to happen when I have this newborn, and the dad is kind of just learning through the mom, like whatever I would tell you. So I think it was so great to do this together, to where you got to learn so much. Obviously I learned a ton too, but it wasn't just me sitting there on my phone at night researching all this. We read the book together. We went to the class together. We did the homework together. And so it was just a really great thing. And we ended up meeting some of our best friends in that class. I was going to say,
it's a community too, to be doing, it's usually other first-time parents too. So there's 2 other couples, and it's great to just be going through, anything with a community of people. But yeah, they're some of our best friends now, and they've got 3 boys.
Yep. We got our girls and they got the boys. But we, so the other part of the Bradley method is a focus on natural childbirth. I wouldn't say that they pushed it in any way or like shamed, I feel like so many people say, oh, like don't feel bad if you get an epidural. Like, don't let people shame you. And there was none of that. Even talked about C-sections and if you have to have a C-section and, all of that. But the focus, I feel like, was on empowering you and educating you on the possibility of having a natural childbirth if that's what you wanted, which it is what I wanted.
I feel like that's what you should want. I mean, not to...
But that... you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble.
Well,
Go ahead.
Regardless of what direction you end up going, like, I feel like you have to be educated on the way it's supposed to go. Like,
I agree.
Women were designed to have a baby naturally. They've been doing it for millennia.
Well,
maybe not that far.
Beginning of
Since
humanity.
the beginning of humanity.
Cain and Abel, ever heard of them?
Yeah.
They came out of Eve.
That's right. Even if you go in and think you're going to go in and just get an epidural and all that, like, I feel like at the end of the day, it's going to be good to be educated on the natural process and all the things that you can do to make it a natural birth, which is the way it was originally designed to be. And then from there, at least you understand what are some good methods and things that you can do. And then from there, yeah, like, however it's meant to go for you is the way it's meant to go. Like, for us, it did not go as planned.
And I didn't have any natural births at this point. But I think it's important, too, because a lot of times the epidural doesn't work or things go awry. Like, you don't get to the hospital in time. So, there's so many scenarios where even if you say, like, oh, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get the epidural, and I'm just going to have this baby in the easiest way possible, then that's great. Like, the best laid plans, babies are going to come and do what they want to do when they want to do it, not when you have it all planned and scheduled. So it is very important, in my opinion, to be educated on this. It's frustrating to me when I see people like influencers online who say, like, literally, one girl I follow, she was like, I'm not looking into anything. I'm just going to trust the doctors. And, for me, this is what's best for me because I'll get too stressed out. And I'm like, nah, I'm sorry. You're about to become a mother. It's okay. You're going to be stressed. Get over it. Like, You need to know. You need to be able to understand true informed consent. I think that's why we don't have informed consent in a lot of medical situations, because people don't want it. They don't want it. They want to just say, oh, I'm just going to trust the doctor. Well, I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. Personally, I think that you should know the risks of an epidural. You should know the cascade of medical interventions that could be coming if you just go in and you're 1 centimeter dilated and you get the epidural. You should understand physiologically what's going to happen in your body, in your baby's body, and all of that. So I think that is just critically important. And I'm thankful that, I've always felt that way. That's not something that I've changed on. I've always felt that way.
Yeah. But I would, without a doubt, highly recommend, and friends and stuff, to do the Bradley method. Like, commit to the 12 weeks. It's once a week for 12 weeks. You're going to learn something. You're going to grow with your spouse. You're going to grow and, like, feel more empowered as the husband, which you should be. And you're just going to learn so much together. You're going to learn techniques. You're going to learn, how it was done, different, things to be informed, have informed consent. And it's just a really great environment.
Yeah, it was just fun.
It was just fun. It was super fun. We always ended up looking forward to it.
I remember when you had to, like, put your hand in an ice bath and I had to, like, try to coach you through the pain or whatever. I'm not sure this is comparable pain, but okay, we'll go with it.
I remember I actually cared so much about these classes that I came back early from a business trip to make it for the night of, like, I flew, it was, I worked for a cruise line at the time and I was in the Bahamas.
Yep.
And instead of taking the cruise ship home, I had to get on a little puddle jumper in the Bahamas. And first I had to find some, like, random taxi guy and all the other taxis, and then take this to a little puddle jumper airplane and then another plane back to the States just to make it there for, like, Tuesday night for our Bradley class method. But it was totally worth it.
Yeah, I can't believe you did that. Looking back, it's kind of like when you look back on, wedding planning and, oh, it's so stressful. And it's like, it literally doesn't matter. You need to chill. But I'm glad that
this was important.
Made it a priority.
Yeah.
So with our first birth, I guess I have no choice but to give a little bit of the birth story. Or else it just doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
So with our first, my water broke at 35 weeks. It was like 35 weeks and 6 days. And so that just sent things awry. It already just was not going as planned. I was supposed to go into labor naturally and not rush to the hospital and, wait till my contractions were 411 and all those things that we were trained for. And like I said, you don't know what's going to happen. And so we went to the hospital and I still was adamant that I was going to progress naturally. I was not going to be induced. I was not going to have Pitocin. I was not going to have an epidural. And so we tried for a very long time to make that happen. And my body was just not ready. It was spontaneous rupture of membranes or whatever, PPROM, something like that.
Yeah.
And so my body just wasn't really ready to go into labor. And so I had to get Pitocin. And at that point, that was when we had been awake for about 45 hours at that point. And I was just like, I'm just going to get that epidural. I just can't do it anymore because I was having strong contractions. I think I had, gotten a little bit dilated. Again, you can go watch the whole birth story to hear the whole thing. But I still was grateful that I had done all that to get my body to a point where, once I got the epidural and the Pitocin, I was able to relax and the Pitocin helped me progress. And so it was like 4 hours, I think. And then she was born. And, if I had just gone right in and immediately started Pitocin and epidural, then who knows what could have happened. So
yeah.
I still was thankful to have had all of that knowledge.
Well, yeah, because I think too, right, when you get the Pitocin or especially the epidural or something, there can be some drugging of the baby, right?
It makes the baby tired, yeah.
Yeah, so like the least amount of time you can do it, I feel like the better. So it was
great. And it can like slow down. Well, when you get the epidural, it can slow things down.
And like
so you're literally getting
drug. The
Pitocin to speed things up and the epidural to slow things down. So it's like fighting against each other. And then, I feel like so many people have a C-section. The C-section rate right now in America is 33%. Whoa. So 1 in 3 people is having a C-section, which, is there a time and place for C-sections? Absolutely. They have saved moms' lives and babies' lives. I do not think that C-sections should go away by any means. People get so upset about this point, but I don't think it's 1 in 3 babies. 1 in 3 babies for eons were not coming into the world via a C-section. I personally, my goal was always to avoid a C-section. If it would have come down to needing one, obviously I would have just wanted the best outcome for me and my baby. But again, understanding the cascade that happens once you start stepping into these procedures that are outside of the natural process of the body. And again, in my first birth, that was an instance where we really had no choice in the sense of once your water breaks, you can't just wait forever. I think you could wait longer than the 24 hours that the hospital gives you, but we waited. I pushed them to 27 hours. Yeah. And then they were like, my OB was like, I can't let you go any longer. So that was that. So that's one thing that I wish that I would have looked into was more of a midwife. So that's another thing. And there are some practices where you can have an OB and a midwife. Which I don't really know exactly how that would work. It's kind of like competing philosophies. And apparently there are a lot of midwives out there that are not necessarily like naturally minded midwives. They must be like a little bit more. It's like OB and then some midwives. And then, I've made him listen to some birth things that he's just like, people are crazy, like out in the woods, like birthing their baby in a cave or something. There's like a full spectrum of people out there.
Yeah.
Looking back, I wish that I would have known more about midwifery and, not
Is
just.
that the word?
Yeah, midwifery.
Sounds like a Harry Potter thing.
And doulas. And, I think back then I kind of had the mindset that those were just like crazy tree huggers, which now I love crazy tree huggers. So
yeah, bring them on.
That I would definitely recommend, looking into that if you're interested in having more of a natural birth process. And even just the pregnancy care, like at an OB, you go in according to their schedule. They spend 2 seconds measuring your belly and hearing the baby's heartbeat, and that's it. And what I've heard is that with a midwife, your appointments are longer and they really get to know you and care about you and your baby and, really understand, are you good on your nutrition, and checking in and seeing how you're doing mentally and physically, of course. And so just a whole different vibe.
And I mean, the thing I knew it, but I wasn't like super informed about it. Just like the experience and the qualifications and all of that a midwife has. I mean, these people deliver thousands of babies just like an OB would. And like, they understand more of the natural process, and they do things like flipping babies around, and they have more experience and more techniques. Like I feel like the medical world has like your kind of checklist of different things, and obviously OBs are trained in the whole C-section thing when more like surgical, medical,
for more high risk pregnancies or people who need more specific monitoring or things like that. I think it's the medical model. That's what they're there for. But it's become this thing where just every single woman, that's just, you're kind of churned through the machine, possibly unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So, okay. So a little bit about my second pregnancy and birth with Georgia 3 years ago, almost exactly.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy. It was a much more smooth experience, but there are things that I regret and would change. So the first is that I chose to get induced. So I was 39 weeks and 4 days when I got induced, or maybe it was 5 days because they pushed us back a little bit. So I think it was like 39 weeks, 5 days. And there was so much trauma in my life at that time, and I had such terrible pain at the end of my pregnancy with Georgia. I literally would get in bed at night and I could not move my legs. I was like asking you to move my legs for me because I had really just bad sciatica pain. And so I just was so done, and our life was so chaotic during that time. She was born in May of 2020, if you do the math, 3 years ago. So it was not the best.
And your dad had passed away in that November of 2019.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
So I feel like all of that factored into my decision to get induced. And I was so worried, you were hearing about how hospitals were not letting dads into the delivery rooms, and, they were just forcing people to quarantine and testing you for COVID and just all this stuff that I was just like terrified. So made that decision. Of course, my OB was just totally on board and so happy that I made that decision because it made it just easy for her to have that scheduled.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I wouldn't do. I wouldn't get induced for basically no reason. In terms of the baby herself, there was no reason to get induced. And even though I got induced, I still wanted to have a natural birth, meaning no epidural. And so I went for a very long time on Pitocin.
You were a trooper.
Without an epidural. And now looking back, I realized that all I needed to do to eliminate a lot of the pain I was experiencing was to be able to go to the bathroom, like just pee. But nobody told me that might be the problem. Literally, I've been hooked up to an IV, at that point for probably
hours.
Who knows? Yeah, how many hours? They're pumping you full of fluids. Like, of course, at some point your bladder is going to be full. And so I was in excruciating pain, literally sitting on the toilet
I know.
like screaming, and they're like, oh, you can't have this baby on the toilet. You got to get back to the bed. So at that point I was like, I just want the epidural. Like, I can't do it anymore. I'm done. So I get the epidural, and I still freaking had the pain because it was my bladder was full. That was the pain. Every contraction was squeezing my full bladder. And when I got the epidural, they forgot to put the catheter in. And so they finally figured that one out. And so then at that point, I finally had relief. And like within 1 hour, Georgia birthed herself because I was so close.
That's right.
So I'm still mad about that. But once again, glad I only had the epidural for 1 hour, and thank God.
And I'm assuming, I'm assuming there's just so much going on that you don't even think about peeing. Like, it's just.
That never crossed my mind.
Yeah.
I thought it was the baby's head coming out. It's like, no, it's like your bladder.
The head came out later.
Yeah, go back and watch the birth story. Yeah. She literally birthed herself underneath the sheets.
Yep. Take your sweet time, nurse, putting on your gloves.
Yeah, putting on her gloves. I'm like,
I feel a lot of pressure.
You need to check me. You need to check me. Okay, let me. Oh, the head's out. My doctor wasn't even freaking there.
Yeah, I had a resident or a 30 or whoever in the hall.
So, yeah, would not recommend doing that. I would.
Yes. Go pee. That's the takeaway message.
Yeah, that's the takeaway from that. So then the other final thing that I wanted to talk about that luckily I had success with in my second pregnancy, but not in my first, is breastfeeding. So in the Bradley method, we did talk a little bit about breastfeeding, but I feel like not enough. I wish that I would have done a separate breastfeeding education. I wish I would have reached out to lactation consultants outside the hospital.
Oh God, you got
the hospital lactation consultant did me way more harm than good.
Horrible.
And so we did not have success with breastfeeding with Avery. I don't know if it's because she was a preemie. I don't know if it was, we'll never know. We can't go back. It is what it is. And luckily she's healthy and wonderful and smart and amazing. But for me, I struggled for a very long time, regretting that it didn't go the way that I had hoped. I had hoped to breastfeed for so long and everything like that. Luckily with Georgia, girl came out hungry, latched as soon as she was able to. And
she screamed for while they were getting Katie all situated and cleaned up. And we didn't at the time, get her on them,
Well, no. Well, I think it was because she was still attached to the cord.
Oh, yeah. Because I think she came so fast.
Yeah.
And they just put her on your chest, and then they had to
I don't know. For whatever reason, it was a while before she was able to actually latch, and she was just screaming her head off.
She was hungry.
She's a hungry girl.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I felt much more prepared the second time, and I know a lot of moms say that the second time you're less stressed about it. Going into that aspect, I was well, it'll either work or it won't, and I'm not going to beat myself up, which was a total lie. I would have beaten myself up had it not gone well. But I think I would have been more able to reach out for help or find education or something if I would have been struggling. Just as a second time mom, you're just more equipped.
Georgia was good to go.
So I would highly recommend that as for first time moms to look into that, and to also for motivation for yourself, look into the importance of breastfeeding or of breast milk, because it benefits baby, it benefits mom as well. There's so many health benefits, so many psychological benefits. We live in a society where we say fed is best, and yes, fed is best if you're saying fed or not fed, but breastfeeding is the best thing that you can do for your baby, and there's no shame if you literally can't do it or anything like that. We don't need to get into all the caveats, but I just hate whenever I see that fed is best. Even when I was a formula feeding mom, I hated that fed is best. It's no, it's not the best. Formula feeding was not the best possible thing for my child.
Especially when it was 90% corn syrup solids.
50%.
50%.
Yeah.
Still.
yeah, look into the ingredients in baby formula too. That will also motivate you to breastfeed. So
one of the things I learned actually pretty recently about breastfeeding is that the milk actually adjusts to what the baby needs, even like on a day-to-day basis based off of how they're feeling and what they're needing. So like, man, how cool is that? God design is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Pretty cool. And people get so mad at humans for drinking cow's milk. They'll say like, well, cow's milk is for baby cows. But then they don't think that human milk is best for baby humans. So it's just like, okay, you can't win with some of these people. So anyways, I can't believe that our baby girl is almost 3.
Happy birthday, little G.
It feels like she was born a long time ago, but at the same time, it feels like yesterday. I can clearly remember her birth. That's one of the biggest differences too. I don't really remember much from Avery's birth because it was a little bit traumatic. And so I think my memory is just gone. But with Georgia's, I remember a lot, and it was a great experience. I mean, it didn't go exactly the way I wanted it to, but thankfully everything still worked out. And healthy mom, healthy baby. That's all that matters.
Yep. And she's still a little baby, even at 3 years old.
Yeah. And she knows it too.
She does.
So anyways, I hope that somebody out there found this helpful. And I know we were looking at some statistics of our podcast this week.
Yes.
And our viewers here on YouTube and our listeners on the podcast platforms are mostly women, like vast majority, close to 100% women. So we appreciate all of you listening to this. Unfortunately, when we make shorts on YouTube to advertise our podcast, that's almost 100% men watching, and they're very mean and angry and bitter. So maybe we need to stop making YouTube shorts. But anyways, ladies, if you want to go to my YouTube channel and watch some shorts, give some thumbs up, leave some kind comments, let's block these haters out there. So we will see you guys next week for another episode of We're Not the Same, and we will have 1, if not 2, exciting announcements to share next week.
And no, it's not a pregnancy announcement.
Oh, yeah, I guess with this episode, that's a good thing to note. No, it's not that. But we have some things in the works behind the scenes that we're really excited about. So come back next week, and we'll see you then.
Bye.